Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Cyrus. If you are someone subscribed to my channel, I just want to apologize for disappearing for like a month and a half. I got really sick and I stayed really sick. We're still not completely sure what the issue was. We're working on it, but I'm alive and I feel pretty okay right now. So, you know, if you're new here, I just wanted to thank you for coming to my channel. Uh, Today, I want to talk about something a little different. I did that Scientology video, and it kind of put me into a downward spiral into religion. My child also recently got baptized, so I decided that I was going to start rereading the Bible just because I haven't read it since, like, I don't know, maybe high school, so it's been like I'm about to age myself, but it's been like 15 years. So today I am going to be talking about the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible. So I'm sure most of you know about the gist of the Bible. It is pretty much everywhere. You may not know specifically what happens and who says what, or whatever. But I can guarantee that you've heard a lot of stories from the Bible, and most of them are probably in the book of Genesis. So I'm just going to cover all of it. The very first page of the Bible starts with the creation of plants, animals, and humans. The first man was Adam, and he lived in the Garden of Eden. He was lonely, so naturally, while he was sleeping, God came and took one of his ribs and made a woman, Eve. Together, they were told by God that they could rule over the Garden of Eden. But God had a single rule: do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What Adam and Eve didn't know is that there was a deceiver nearby. While Adam was off doing something, Eve was hanging out, and Satan became a snake, and he came into Eden, and he basically gaslit Eve into eating off of this one tree that God specifically said, do not eat off. Eve knew that Adam needed this knowledge, so she talked him into eating from the tree, just as Satan had talked her into eating from the tree. God returned to the Garden of Eden to chit chat with Adam and Eve, and they were hidden. They came out and mentioned being naked, and he knew immediately that they had eaten from the tree. They were banished from Eden, and this is where death and sin was supposedly created according to the Bible. So the story of Adam and Eve continues, and they have two children, Cain and Abel, which I'm sure you've also heard of. Cain and Abel both praise God, often giving him offerings. He is always pleased with Abel's, but he's not so pleased with Cain. This created a lot of tension and jealousy towards Abel, who is his younger brother. Cain led him to a field and murdered him. The Lord returns and he asks Cain where his brother is. Initially, Cain acted like he didn't know what happened, but God knew. He cursed Cain and marked him with eternal life with suffering. Cain moved on, eventually having a wife and some children. So the story goes back to Adam, and now it talks about a new son, Seth, and his son, Enosh. They call upon the Lord, and then the book of Genesis just lists descendants of Adam just to show the longevity of each of them and his bloodline. Eventually, we're introduced to Noah. So people began to multiply and choose wives. Sons of God, so angels, started procreating with human women, and these children were referred to as Nephilim, which I talk about in my giants video. So God saw all of the sin of the earth, and he regretted making people. However, God did find favor with Noah. God told Noah that the earth sucked and that he wanted to destroy it and that he needed to build an ark for mankind to survive. Noah was instructed to bring his family and two of every land animal. God flooded the earth and everyone else died. Noah, his wife, their three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, plus their three wives, were all on board. and of course the animals. Eventually, God allowed the water to disappear, and Noah's family finally found safety on land. Noah builds an altar to God and vows that he will never sin. At some point, Noah dies, and then his family line is listed. So next comes the Tower of Babel. At this point in time, everyone spoke a single language. They decided that they wanted to build a tower all the way to heaven to gain recognition. God didn't like that, so he scattered them across the earth and made groups of people speak different languages, and that is why there are so many different languages today. Once again, the story shifts back to descendants of Adam, which is Noah's son Shem. More generations are introduced from Shem, and we meet Abram. Abram, his wife and their son, and his nephew Lot all left their country, and God guided them somewhere new. Eventually, they ended up in Egypt. Abram decided that his wife was just so beautiful that he did not want anyone to know they were married because he feared for his life. So he started referring to her as his sister. The Pharaoh took a liking to her. He took her as his wife. Abram was given gifts as the sibling of the Pharaoh's wife, but God did not like that, so he started plaguing the Egyptians. So they were plagued until she was returned to Abram, and then the two of them and his nephew Lot fled Egypt. So at this point, Abram and Lot part ways, and Lot ends up in Sodom, which eventually is taken over and Lot is captured. Of course, Abram rescues him, and then Abram suddenly remembers that he wants children, but his wife is infertile. He informs God that he intends to have children with their house servant. He slept with her, and she eventually bore him a son, Ishmael. Now that he has slept with the house servant Hagar, his wife is not too happy, and they've got a beef going on because he's sleeping with both of them. Hagar is rude, so Sarai kicks her out, and God tells her to come back, and Sarai can have children. The Lord blesses Abram and changes his name to Abraham. He promises kings from his descendants. He then blessed man with circumcision, which is still very common, at least here in the United States. We go back to Sodom, where Lot is met by two angels. Lot invited them in, and then all the men of Sodom decided that they wanted these two angels, so they surrounded the house. They wanted the two angels to come out of the house so that they could fornicate. Well, Lot decided to offer up his two virgin daughters instead of the two angels. The men tried to attack Lot, but the angels grabbed him and shut the door and barricaded it. The next morning, the two angels told Lot to take his family and to run. Sodom and Gomorrah were wicked places, and they were full of sin. They were told to run, to never look back. And as they were, God rained down sulfur and fire, destroying both cities. Lot's wife did indeed look back, and she turned into a pile of salt. Lot and his two daughters do make it out. Lot is old, and his two daughters are worried about their descendants. They decide that they're going to get him drunk and, to have said offspring. They both become pregnant. So the story shifts back to Abraham and his wife Sarai. They end up somewhere else, and once again he calls her his sister, and since she was so beautiful, she was taken to the king. God came in the king's dreams and threatened him for taking a married woman. The king wanted to return her to Abraham, where he confessed that he did not technically lie because they do indeed share a parent. But they are still married. God promises her a baby, and eventually she gives birth to Isaac. Ishmael had beef with Isaac, so she just demanded that they both leave. Abraham packs stuff, and he leaves with Ishmael. God told Abraham that he needed to build an altar and sacrifice Isaac. He goes and finds Isaac. He goes to the top of a mountain. He builds the altar. He straps down Isaac, and then as he is about to murder him, an angel said, whoa, 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 whoa. You passed God's faith test. You do not have to kill your own son. Eventually, Sarai dies, and Isaac finds a wife. he finds a beautiful virgin girl by the name of Rebecca. And Abraham had no problem finding a new wife, and she bore him multiple children. Isaac and Rebecca have twin boys named Jacob and Esau. There are famines, so Isaac and his family move. Taking after his dear old dad, he was telling people that Rebecca was his sister. Everyone was very shook when they were found to be, caressing each other. Isaac prospered off the land and he became rich. He was actually told to leave the land because he was too powerful. As Isaac approaches death, he tells Esau to go and hunt to make him a tasty meal, and he will bless him. Rebecca overhears this, so while Esau is out hunting, she goes and finds Jacob and tells him to bring 2 goats for Rebecca to cook. Isaac ended up blessing Jacob. Esau returns with his dish, only to find out that Jacob had deceived Isaac. Esau planned to kill Jacob after he was done mourning, and then the 2 of them go off to find wives. Jacob ran into his first cousin, Rachel, whom he kissed. Jacob promised 7 years of work so he could take Rachel as his wife. After 7 years, Jacob went to Rachel's father and told him that it was time. Instead of Rachel, he gave his oldest daughter, Leah, to him to take as his wife. When Jacob discovers that Leah is next to him, he is very disappointed. Their father tells him that he can have Rachel after another 7 years of work. Jacob completed his 7 years, and he was given Rachel also. God saw that Jacob preferred Rachel, so he actually made her barren and made Leah very fruitful. They had 3 children, Levi, Simeon, and Judah. Rachel was jealous that they had children together, so she offered her servant to Jacob so they could have children. Well, they had 2 sons. Leah then wanted more children, so she offered up her servant to Jacob to have more children. Leah and Jacob had a total of 6 sons and 1 daughter, Dinah. Rachel and Leah's dad was jealous that Jacob was living such a good life, so he told him to leave. Along his journey, he sent Esau a message, who in return went to find Jacob, who took 400 men with him. He was fearing a fight, but all he got from his brother was an embrace. They eventually decided to part ways, and Jacob and his family made a camp off to the side. Jacob and his family set up camp. His daughter, Dinah, was essayed by the prince of the region. The man became obsessed with her and asked Jacob if he could marry her. Jacob's sons told him that they could only have Dinah if all of the men in the region were circumcised. After all of the men were circumcised, 2 of the brothers waited a couple of days and then went and actually slaughtered all of the men when they couldn't fight back. They took Dinah, they looted the city, and they deuced. They returned to Bethel and they built an altar. Jacob was blessed, and this is when God changed his name to Israel. Later, Rachel dies while giving birth to their last child, Benjamin. Jacob now has 12 sons, by the way. Jacob and Esau return to Isaac and watch him take his last breath. The story then shifts to one of Jacob's sons, Joseph. Joseph was sent to find his brothers, but his brothers were plotting to kill him. When they took him, they took his well-known colorful robe off and they threw him into a pit. They ended up selling him to Ishmaelites, where they took him to Egypt. The brothers ripped up his robe, they dunked it in blood, and sent it to Jacob. And of course, he mourned because he thought his son was dead. Judah found a wife, and she bore his children. After his wife died, he was going out to shear a sheep where he came across a woman who he thought was a prostitute. He told her to sleep with him, and she became pregnant. The woman was actually the widow of his second son. Once the family found out, Judah commanded that she be killed, only to reveal items that he had given her in exchange for sex. So she gave birth to twins, and meanwhile, Jacob is now in Egypt where God is with him. His master saw this and let Jacob run the entire household. The master's wife took a liking to Joseph and actually asked him if they could have sex. He refused to have sex with her, but she continuously asked day after day if he would have sex with her until she surprised him with an empty house. She grabbed his cloak and he just ran away without it. She was pissed that she didn't get what she wanted, so she told her husband and everyone that Joseph tried to take advantage of her. Joseph was thrown in jail, where the next day, two prisoners had revealed that they had the same dream. Joseph interprets the dreams for both of them. He told them that one man would be hung by the Pharaoh within the next couple of days. And Joseph was right. Several years later, the Pharaoh had a dream, and he called all of the wise men and magicians of Egypt to try to interpret this dream for him. Well, the surviving prisoner that didn't die that day actually told the Pharaoh about Joseph interpreting the dreams for them. The Pharaoh called for Joseph, where he told the Pharaoh that his dreams meant that there was going to be 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph told them to save food from the abundance for the famine. The Pharaoh was so impressed by Joseph that he made him second in command. During the first 7 years, Joseph got married, had children, and traveled all over Egypt to start making stockpiles of the abundance of food. During the famine, Joseph was selling grain not only through Egypt but also surrounding areas. 10 of Jacob's other sons were being sent to Egypt to gather grain. Joseph recognized them, but they did not recognize Joseph. He declared them spies and told them that they had to go fetch their youngest brother. He sent 9 of them to bring back the youngest brother while he kept Simeon in prison. The sons returned home, where they relayed the message to Jacob, who was distraught that 2 of his sons were gone and now a 3rd son was being requested. After they finished the grain that they had been given by Joseph, they returned to Egypt with the youngest son, Benjamin. Joseph invited them to his house for dinner, and as they were leaving, he slipped a silver cup into Benjamin's bag. Joseph sent men after them, and they told the brothers that Benjamin had stole this silver cup from Joseph's house. The brothers are caught, and he tells the brothers that he is going to take Benjamin as his house slave. Judah pled with him and told him that Jacob would die if he lost another son. Joseph then reveals his identity to the brothers and sends for Jacob. Jacob was, of course, elated to find out that Joseph was still alive. He became himself again and immediately traveled to Egypt. Jacob took all his possessions, his sons, his daughter, and all his grandchildren, and they just went and moved to Egypt. 66 people is what he took in tow with him. The famine continued, and at this point, people were starting to run out of money and resources. Joseph basically took over Egypt in exchange for grain. The Israelites then settled in Egypt, where they became very prosperous. Jacob blessed Joseph's sons and his sons, and then he died. And at some point later, it mentions Joseph dying. So this is a very... I'm just saying that if the book didn't say Bible on the front and this was the first chapter of the book, I just want to say thank you again for coming to my video. Thank you for staying until the end. I hope you enjoy this video. If you want me to make any other videos, or if you want to have conversations about anything that I talked about, go ahead and drop a comment. If you got to the end, drop a like. Hit that subscribe. Stick around. Watch my other videos. Hang out with me a little bit. I don't know what else to say besides have a great day.